Good afternoon, everyone who's joining us on Eastern Time anyway, and welcome to Helping Families Claim the 2021 Expanded Child Tax Credit. If you can shift the slide. That's me. I'm Debbie Weinstein, Executive Director of the Coalition on Human Needs. And I am very pleased to just open this up to tell you what you'll be expecting, to welcome you, and to let you know who we are. So if you go to the next slide. That says a little bit about the Coalition on Human Needs. We're an alliance of national groups, and we have been around for 40 years advocating at the federal level to try to better meet the needs of people with low incomes. And we are collaborating in this project, thank you, with the Partnership for America's Children. And you'll hear more about them shortly and meet their leader. But the partnership has over 50 members, multi-issue child advocacy organizations in 40 states. And together, the partnership and the coalition are collaborating on this child tax credit outreach campaign. And if you go to the next slide, that I didn't want to fail to thank our generous funders, the Rockefeller Foundation and the David and Lucille Packard Foundation. And now you can go on to the agenda. So what we're going to talk about today, I've welcomed you. We're going to hear about the child tax credit and why it is so incredibly important to make sure that everyone who's eligible gets the money they're owed. We're going to hear from Code for America, and I'll introduce the speakers in a moment, about outreach lessons from the extraordinary work that they have done and are doing, so we can learn from those lessons. Then we'll hear about options for organizations that we hope will want to carry out this child tax credit outreach. And you'll also be taken through a resource toolkit that we have compiled. And then at the end of all of that, we'll have questions and answers. So there's a couple of things I did just want to remind you of before I introduce the speakers specifically. You all have your little boxes where you're residing for the Zoom meeting. If you scroll up to the little dots in the right-hand corner, you can change the way your name is listed. And if you do that to have your name and the organization you're with and your state, that would be very helpful as we try to get to know you a little bit. In addition, I did want to let you know that if you're seeing it's live streamed, that's our captioning service. And if you look at the bottom of your screen where it says closed caption, if you need that, click on that and you'll get the captioning. This is also being recorded. We're going to share with everyone who registered for this, the recording and the slides and all the materials that you'll be learning about today. That will actually also include, we will give you information about how you can sign up to receive some printed materials. The deadline for that will be January 31st, which is this Monday. So be on the lookout for more about that. And finally, Q&As. If you'll put questions in the chat, we will get to them in the time at the end there. So, okay, now if you want to change the slide and we'll start introducing. I mentioned, of course, the Partnership for America's Children. Well, Deborah Stein, or Debbie, is the network director of the partnership. And I won't read everything on the bio, but she has a tremendous level of experience in policy analysis, advocacy. She's got a tremendous amount of experience working with state advocacy groups and providing services for them. And the partnership is a wonderful resource for the work that we're doing on many things, and certainly including the child tax credit outreach. And our next speaker after Debbie, well, actually, I think our order got shifted a little bit, but our next speaker will be Courtney O'Reilly, who's the Senior Program Manager for Tax Benefits for Code for America. And Courtney has this wonderful, rich experience working with the Vita program, free tax preparation help in Colorado. You know, she knows well how to expand this service and will tell us about what Code for America learned in the efforts that it had done during the advanced CTC period. Then the next speaker is going to be Elini De Fonseca. So if you could find her slide. Going.
Not sure that I'm actually able to go back here, but I'll work on it.
Okay. Elini is one of our two child tax credit outreach coordinators working jointly for this joint project. And prior to joining to carry out the CTC outreach project, she was program director for the East Harlem Aging Services, the Stanley M. Isaacs Neighborhood Center in New York City, and a health counselor at Harlem Health Advocacy Partners in New York City. So she is a wonderful resource, and she'll be talking about various options for outreach. And then the final speaker, and I'm sorry that we're not able to go backwards to show you these slides, Julia Beebe, also a child tax credit outreach coordinator for this project. And she and Elini are helping us to launch it. And she's previously worked as a lead organizer and community organizer for the Matahari Women's Workers Center in Boston, and also served as a community organizer for Valley Interfaith in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. So we have wonderful speakers with a lot of great experience. And with that, I think we can turn to Debbie Stein to give you the CTC 101.
Well, thank you so much, Debbie. And this is a project that both of our organizations are deeply committed to, because it has the potential for making huge improvements in the lives of children and families. So what is this expanded child tax credit? The bill that was passed in March or April of 2021, the American Rescue Act plan, expanded the child tax credit for 1 year. And that expansion is so significant that if we can reach all the families that are eligible for it, we can cut the number of children in poverty in our country by about 40%. That's actually a partial estimate of the importance of it, because lots of families are so deeply in poverty that even with the credit, they won't be lifted out of poverty, but they'll be at least lifted out of deep poverty. And that's 1.1 million children. Deep poverty is incredibly damaging to children. So helping families access this credit is truly going to be life-changing for a lot of children and families. And you have a really important role to play in helping families claim the credit. And we're working very hard to make that easy for you to take on without feeling like you have to do enormous amounts of work or be a tax expert yourself. So if we go to the next slide, what's the expansion? First of all, the credit was expanded in a way that for the first time, families could get half of the credit in monthly payments starting in July to December. But to get the second half of the credit, or to get the full credit if they didn't get those advanced payments, they have to file taxes this year. So the first part of the expansion was that people could get it on a monthly basis. The second part was that the value of the credit got increased significantly. So it used to be $2,000 per child. For 2021, it is $3,600 for children under 6 and $3,000 for children age 6 through 17. There's also, and this is the third and in some ways the most impactful part of the expansion, no minimum income requirement. Families who have absolutely no earned income are still eligible for the full credit. And if they don't owe any taxes, the full credit gets refunded back to them. So they get this cash payment. That means that families who are unemployed the full year, families living on disability, senior citizens who are raising grandchildren or other relatives' children on Social Security, for the first time, all of those families are eligible for this credit. Most families got the credit automatically, and you probably saw a lot of press coverage around that. But families that had not filed recent tax returns or claimed their economic stimulus payments had to take action to get the credit because the IRS didn't know that they had children in their families. Next slide, please. So now is a critical moment to help those families get the money that they're entitled to. The tax season started this Monday and it goes through April. And families must file a tax return if they want to get the remaining half of the credit if they got their advanced payments, or the full credit if they didn't get any advanced payments. So it's essential for us all to work to help these families claim file their taxes so they can get the full benefit of the credit. I keep saying that this is a 1-year credit. Congress has been considering an extension of the expanded tax credit into 2022. If they don't do that, this will have been a 1-year phenomenon. And so one of the things that families can do if they want to see it keep coming in future years, and one of the things you can think about helping them do is share their stories about the importance of the child tax credit to their children and their families to help build support for extending the expansion into 2022 and beyond. Right now, we're focusing on getting the families the money that they're entitled to for 2021, but obviously this is something we'd love to see continue. Next slide, please. So why is it that we're saying that we need everyone to reach out to these families? As I said, most families got the credit automatically because the IRS knew who they were, that they had children in the household and they were eligible. But 4 million or more children are at risk of missing out on those payments. Those are families where they had very little or no earned income, and they weren't legally obligated to file taxes, or they may have faced barriers in filing taxes. And so they didn't file taxes recently, they didn't claim the economic stimulus payment, the IRS didn't know about them and didn't make advance payments to them. And if they don't know about this credit, they're not going to realize they need to file taxes this year to get the full credit. This also has significant racial impact because Black and Latinx kids were always disproportionately excluded from the child tax credit, and they're more likely to miss out on it. Families heard a lot about the economic stimulus payment. They heard a lot about the child tax credit. The fact that they didn't apply or to get the advance payment tells us that they really need help understanding that it is available to them, that they need to hear it from trusted community organizations like yours, and that it's not just a matter of knowing that it exists, there's barriers that we can help them overcome. That starts sounding scary, right? Like you need to be a tax expert, but you do not need to be a tax expert. A little later in this webinar, Courtney O'Reilly will talk about the Code for America website, which helped families navigate this process and how they can do that, as well as the outreach lessons they learned from navigating families through the outreach process in 2021. Next slide, please. I want to start by making it clear how much money we're talking about and why it's so valuable for these families. Imagine that you have a family with one adult and 3 children, one of whom is under 6 and 2 aren't. For the 2021 tax credit, after they file a tax return and they've gotten the full credit, they'll get almost $10,000. But in addition, if the family had enough earned income, they could get over $6,500 from an earned income tax credit, and they could get $1,400 a piece from their third economic stimulus payment, which would be another $12,000. So we're looking at over $20,000 for this family. That's life changing, even if they only get it this 1 year. And certainly if we could get them the child tax credit in future years, the other 2 credits are not at stake for advocacy, it would make a huge difference in future years. That's why it's worthwhile you're taking the time to help families apply, because we're not talking about a few $100s. We are talking about tens of thousands of dollars for these families. Next slide, please. So what do they need to do? As we said, most families got the automatic credit, but the ones who didn't get it had to affirmatively let the IRS know about them. And they were able to do so either on the IRS website or through a getctc.org site managed by Code for America. A lot of these families did not do that, and so they need to file a tax return. Everybody needs to file a tax return to get the second half. Families that didn't get it need to file a full one. And if they file a full tax return, they also can get those other credits. Next slide, please. But as I said, families need help understanding why they should file and how to get help filing. Next slide. So here's a timeline to give you a sense of what we're talking about. The tax season started 2 days ago. From now into February, the local volunteer income tax assistance sites, which are called Vita sites, are opening. And these are sites where low-income people can go and get help filing their taxes for free. People who have a tax filing obligation, who make enough income to be required to file, have until April 18th. If they can't get it done by then, they can request an extension. They are supposed to pay any taxes that are due when they get their extension, but as a practical matter, the families we're talking about don't owe taxes, they're going to get money back. So it's pretty easy to ask for an extension. Families that are not required to file don't even have to do that, and they can file at any time during 2022 a tax return to get that 2021 credit. And so we are asking you not only to take action on this between now and April, but also think about it in future months. Sometime in the spring, and we're currently hearing April or May, but that's not definite, Code for America will likely open up a simplified online filing portal again, and that will let people who weren't required to file claim the child tax credit and maybe a third economic stimulus payment. So we're hoping that in addition to trying to reach your families now, you'll think about using our toolkit and our materials in the spring when that portal opens to help people file in a more simplified, easy way. But it's really great if we can get people to go to the Vita sites now, because when they file a full tax return, they get a lot of those other credits as well. And that portal will stay open until late fall of 2022. Next slide, please. So here's the very simple steps that you can take to help families claim it. Right now, if their local sites aren't open, they can go to getyourrefund.org, which is available in English or Spanish. And these slides will be shared, so you'll have these URLs. And when it becomes available in their community, they'll be told that the local sites are open. They'll also be helped to figure out what's the best service for them. And there are 3 options. People who are comfortable with with handling financial matters and are comfortable using free tax filing software can do that. And there's chat assistance available if they have questions about it. Or they can do it entirely virtually. They can upload their tax documents, and a volunteer at one of the Vita sites will work with them looking at all the documents virtually. If they need to really meet with somebody in person, and some people do, the site will help them find their local Vita site. Next slide, please. And we just want to make sure that you have this link, which is for people who are going to go to an appointment in person. Here's a checklist of all the documents that they need to take. That way they can avoid having to go back because they didn't have all the documents the first time. Sorry about that. So I'm now going to turn this over to Courtney O'Reilly. Courtney comes from Code for America. They ran the fabulous getctc.org site in 2021 to help families claim the advance credit. And they had a lot of outreach lessons from that, which Courtney is going to share with us now. And Courtney, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Hi, everybody. As Debbie mentioned, my name is Courtney O'Reilly. I'm the Senior Program Manager with Code for America. And if we just want to go to the next slide. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with Code for America, we're a nonprofit organization that partners with government to strengthen the delivery of public services through human-centered technology. And we've included tax benefits as part of that. And as Debbie mentioned, in September of 2021, we launched getctc.org's simplified filing tool to help new and lapsed filers access their advanced child tax credit payments and any missing stimulus checks. And today, I'll just be sharing a few of the key learnings we found after looking at a lot of data. This is just a very, very reduced number of takeaways. We will be publishing a full report soon. I don't have the exact date on that, but stay tuned for more information. But if we go to the next slide, the first thing, and this is different than a lot of the things we had been taught and a lot of our inclinations, but simplified filing was a success. Even people who had never filed taxes before were able to use getCTC, finish the process quickly, and find it relatively easy to use. It was so successful that it may have changed the calculus around tax benefits and outreach. When filing processes are difficult, we've always said outreach alone is not enough to generate returns, but with simplified filing in the mix, it can be. A couple of stats that helped us draw on this conclusion was, one, we helped file over 115,000 accepted returns. 78% found the tool easy or extremely easy, including first-time filers. The typical experience was that most people finished the tool in 10 minutes on their mobile phone. 75% finished in under 30 minutes, and over 99% did not request any additional assistance. Next slide. And while getCTC was a simple tool, it's embedded in a really complicated system. Many clients had questions or issue about tax benefits that were not related to and could not be resolved with the simplified filing. And many of them tried to use getCTC when it was not the right tool for them. There was a profound need for navigation and assistance around those questions, but that assistance inherently could not generate new or simplified returns. Some of the most common issues we saw that came through in this way were those who were missing or reported incorrect payments, dependents who had already been claimed by somebody else, and claiming a 2021 newborn. Some of these things added complexities around what the CTC update portal was eventually supposed to do and never really came to be. So that just kind of heightened some of the confusion for a lot of families that we talked to. In 2021, the term navigators was used by a whole host of partners offering very different services and types of assistance. And based on those services, we made two important categories or distinctions between that type of assistance. The first is community connectors. And those are really people who are just conducting more thoughtful community outreach with potentially some light triage, what tool is right for them, what resource do they need, but mostly providing access to the tool. So whether that was helping somebody who didn't have access to the internet or a smartphone, people who needed to do language interpretation, those types of things. And the second category was really what we call advanced assisters. And those are people who are helping clients with the issues that we named. So things that couldn't be resolved through getCTC, but just needed additional help to either file a full tax return, deal with a rejected return, give them information to help them file accurately this tax season. all of those things. So we really did see that distinction, and it's sort of important with some planning for next year, which is why I bring it up. The next big lesson, and I think this is one that definitely surprised me, was to not let assistance get in the way of simplified filing. As I said earlier, simplified filing was simple and most people were able to do it on their own. But we did see some groups assume that their clients would need assistance and offered it ahead of the tool. So this may have come in the form of sending out outreach for them to come to an in-person event rather than just telling them to go to get CTC. Anything like that, it tended to decrease the number of people who actually utilize the tool, just because it seemed to add an extra burden of assistance and interpretation that this is actually really difficult. And then next slide. I wanted to dive into two specific strategies that I thought would be relevant to this group. And the first is working with benefits agencies. So one of the most promising thing that we saw was direct messages from benefits agencies or adjacent groups to their beneficiaries were the single easiest way to cheaply reach new non-filers. But there's a few key features that make these messages even more effective. The first, text messages are most effective as opposed to robocalls or emails. And then the message should come from the benefits agency. So whenever it can actually come from the agency itself, that's going to build in some trust. In addition, messages should contain the target URL for us, obviously getctc.org. But again, whenever you put learn more, ask for help ahead of that unique URL, you may see a significant drop off in the effectiveness. And then we saw a really good practice of sending several text messages. It could all be the same language, could be slightly different, but sending it over and over to the same list actually doesn't strongly decrease the number of returns you're going to get from that text message. One of our big things is if every state benefits agency sent one good text message, it could generate 50,000 accepted returns. It would be even greater if they sent, several messages over that time. The very small chart on the right depicts the pinkish red is when Massachusetts sent 2 different text messages. And you can see that led to the largest spike of submitted and accepted returns in the state. And next slide. Next, we have outreach to schools and childcare facilities. So keeping in mind that on-the-ground community outreach and navigation is challenging because it's hard to find the right non-filers. That being said, outreach through schools and childcare centers is a very promising channel. And we have a little bit of limited data, but we're really interested in learning more about how this outreach goes this year. And when thinking about how to best approach these communities, I'll offer just kind of one other best practices, which is in our report, which is the idea of a shallow and wide approach. So engage a large number of partners in basic training. So that means have a large number of on-the-ground staff across multiple school districts or childcare facilities attend a very basic training. Think of the community connector role, really not answering difficult questions, make them feel comfortable that they're really just getting the resource in the hands of the family. The next big thing with this is give them the ability to escalate questions if needed. So if they're running across some really difficult questions, don't put that pressure on them. Make sure that they have a resource to kind of escalate that problem to, so they don't feel responsible for answering something. And next slide. With the very little time I have available, I just want to remind everyone about the timing. Debbie just went into this, but really want to iterate that from January 31st through April 19th, simplified filing will not be available. So we do have the virtual Vita option at Get Your Refund, the filing yourself at Get Your Refund, and the lookup tool. Those are all amazing resources and we're really excited about them, but a lot of the things about how easy this was, how families don't need additional assistance, is really about the tool that will become available in late April or early May. One other request that we have is to request a unique URL. So if you're sending people to getyourrefund.org, we can give you a unique URL that will help track the impact of that effort. I put the link in the slide, but I'll also put it in the chat after my presentation concludes. And it's just as many different outreach efforts as you have, we can produce that many unique URLs. So if you're trying a text message and an in-person campaign and all of these things, you should be able to track those efforts, and we can help you do so. And then just one last plug on the next slide. So we have two upcoming events. The first, which is tomorrow, is a fuller discussion around sort of our end of filing season key lessons learned. So again, I summarized a few of those important lessons that I thought would be applicable to this group, but we have a more robust convening tomorrow. Happy to have anybody join. It's open to the public. And then on February 3rd, we're doing a Get Your Refund Navigator training in partnership with the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And this is really just sharing how to best help people through the 2022 tax season, especially given the fact that there isn't simplified filing in the beginning of tax season. And with that, just going on to the next slide. Thanks for letting me present this. I will now be handing it off to Elini. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Elini De Fonseca, and as Deb mentioned earlier, I'm one of the two CTC outreach coordinators on this project. So I'm going to be going over some options for CTC outreach. They really dovetail nicely with everything that Courtney just talked about. It kind of just reiterates and emphasizes a lot of those lessons. And these come from a lot of different other lessons as well that we've compiled that have been shared with us by other partners. So when looking at different levels of effective outreach, we're looking at really two different levels, and level one being raising awareness, and level two, kind of a deeper engagement with families. You go to the next slide. So one example of a level one outreach activity is the sending of the mass text messages, robocalls, and or emails that were also just mentioned by Courtney. So the texts specifically have proven to be especially effective, but it's helpful to communicate through a combination of methods. And here we have two different examples of messaging that are provided from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. So on the left, you have a sample text message and another a sample voice message that could be used. Next slide. Additionally, you can record a phone hold message or video message for waiting room office spaces or office screens that can be playing while families and other individuals are waiting to see providers. And this is another sample hold message from CBPP. Next slide. And of course, hanging posters in waiting rooms, distributing flyers, sending flyers homes, and also putting them up in other public spaces can be really useful for raising level one raising awareness outreach activity. And these are two flyers that will also be in the toolkit. The one on the left is from GMMB, and the one on the right is from CBPP. Next slide. And also adding CTC related questions to existing intake forms, as well as providing workers with local Vita numbers or flyers. This can also help to provide families information or help organizations screen who could use additional information provided to them on the CTC. Also adding flyers and FAQs to resources already going out to families. This is an example. This is a partial screenshot of the FAQ we've created, and that will also be in the toolkit. Next slide. And also, and this was also just spoken about by Courtney, but where partners have relationships with state or local benefit agencies, encouraging them to send out mass communications to beneficiaries about the CTC and where they can get help can be really useful. Again, these agencies in particular have been found to be trusted and can be a way to get to families that is better received in terms of messaging. Next slide. And also another level one outreach activity is just sending out a message in a regular newsletter or a post on social media. These are examples of social media from the Digital Community Activation Creative Toolkit that came out at the end of 2021. Next slide. And this now, it's speaking on level 2 outreach activities. Some suggestions are also to hold a phone bank or conduct peer-to-peer texting, or holding a Q&A with specialists such as tax specialists, immigration attorneys, or other subject matter experts. And as we know, these can be held in person where possible, via Zoom or on Facebook Live, among other options. Next slide. And finally, other level 2 outreach activities can involve helping families actually schedule their Vita appointments where it's applicable, especially for service providers. Working in collaboration with local tax sites and partners to make tax prep services accessible. So helping to coordinate language interpretation, childcare during appointments, transportation to tax sites, etc. And organizing tax filing or document preparation events. So working with Vita volunteers to help families prepare necessary documents before Vita appointments. And I think that's the last one. Next slide. So I'll turn it over to Julia now.
Thanks, Elini. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Beebe. This is the moment you've all been waiting for with our resource toolkit. And I've seen a lot of questions in the chat. You don't have to fear. All of this will be sent out, both the slides, the links, and the resource toolkit. So I'm going to go ahead and click into the toolkit and do a brief orientation of some of the materials we have. And just ask my fellow presenters to let me know if something's not popping up on the screen. And just a quick note, I want to thank a lot of partners. We're producing some of the materials, but also relying on partners like the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, GMMB, Code for America, Unidos, Shaw Family Foundation, and others, Center for Taxpayer Rights, to help us produce these materials. And once you have this link, this is where all of our materials will land into the future. So as we get more materials, as we get materials translated, you can keep checking back at this link and you should see the updated resources. And if you're noticing something missing, you're wondering if we're producing it, we would love to hear from you and get that feedback. So we'll send out this link, but if we go in, this is our toolkit. I'm not going to go through everything here, but just to explain a little, it starts with the toolkit cover letter. So some of you, probably most of you, work on a team. You're working with a group of other staff and service providers, and you might want a little bit of language about how you can explain this in a nutshell to others who are doing this work. So the toolkit really provides the why of this, why this is so important, and why everyone should be engaged in this type of outreach. We're doing this training today. This was sort of a high-level training, but we also can do trainings that go more specifically into eligibility, that go into troubleshooting. And so we're always happy to work with you at the state level or local level, and we'll provide our email information. But if you're interested in hosting another training with your staff, we would love to do that with you. Courtney already mentioned how we can track the impact of different outreach activities. And if you need any support with that, we're happy to help you set that up. And then this is a set of outreach materials, flyers, posters, and more. A lot of other materials are coming, including translated versions. I can click on a few. We have a customizable flyer, if this opens up okay, from GMMB. And so this is a flyer that you could give and actually provide local information as to the type of assistance that's available. We've created frequently asked questions that Elini showed before. This is in English, and we also have this translated into Spanish. And these really anticipate the types of questions that we expect families to ask, and the types of questions we've been hearing as we've been doing this outreach. So we really encourage you to check out these questions as you're working with families, as these are common topics that do come up. I know that I saw someone in the chat mentioning other tax credits, and that's absolutely right. We know that we're not doing this in isolation, that there's also the earned income tax credit, the child and dependent care credit, and our partners at Center on Budget and Policy Priorities have made several different materials that touch on all of these different credits. So these are also included in the toolkit. Of course, you don't have to capture the information I'm scrolling through, but just trying to give you a sense of what's here. We have some press information if you're interested in doing press work. As both Courtney and Elini mentioned, one of the most effective ways of doing outreach is to get public benefits agencies communicating to their beneficiaries. These are folks that families are accustomed to hearing from for SNAP benefits or WIC benefits. And so we know many of you might have relationships with local, county, state benefits agencies. So soon we'll be uploading a whole toolkit for these agencies. And we put that in here so that if you're working with, for example, an agency that gives staff benefits, you can support them in preparing to do this child tax credit outreach. We have a number of social media resources from GMNB, from Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. If you click this link, you can find it. We've done a number of blogs, and so if that's something that will help reach members within your network, we're happy to help you draft one, or you can use this template. As we discussed, sort of text messages and phone banks are really, and robocalls are incredibly important. And there's an excellent resource here with sample messages. We're also working on getting this in, I believe, 11 additional languages. So this will be provided within the toolkit. We have resources for the folks who are doing work in Puerto Rico. We're also working on a very significant section for immigrant families, and we'll be continuing to add here. For now, there are resources if you're supporting families and getting an ITIN. This is a locator for that. If you're doing some work in English and Spanish and looking for a glossary, that's included. And as Courtney was sharing, we've learned a lot about sort of what the best practices are about this outreach, and we're continuing to learn, and we would love to hear from all of you about what's working and what's not working. And so we're uploading these reports as we have them. This one is a great report on benefit agency and school outreach in Massachusetts. And then we also have done focus group findings with individuals who have not filed recently, and service providers. And so this is a slideshow, as you can see. This is for individuals who really want to think about what's the best messaging for reaching families and overcoming some of the common questions and concerns related to this outreach. We have a section here on tax filing. I think that I'll just show you get your refund. This is the page that we've talked about a few times here. I know someone was asking where you can find Vita sites, and you can also do that through Get Your Refund. I believe I also saw a question about languages that this website's available in. And if you click in the corner, you can also get this website in Spanish. And so this is sort of a one-stop online shop for where people can get virtual, do-it-yourself, or in-person assistance. We have a list of documents to bring to your tax appointment, and we now also have that in Spanish. We have a locator to find low-income taxpayer clinics. And so this is if someone is in a dispute with the IRS, perhaps custody related, a different parent claimed the child tax credit, for example. These centers may be able to support, and this helps you locate those in your area. And while we're really making sure people know about Vita sites and free tax assistance, we know some people will turn to paid tax preparers, and that there are many things to sort of be on the lookout for. And so we've included information from the IRS like this one, how to avoid a scam, and also how to choose a reputable tax preparer. We've learned in our focus groups that people often want to hear it from the source itself, in this case, the IRS. And so including this in your outreach can be important. And fortunately, this is available in a number of different languages. So I think that's an overview of the resource toolkit that we have. And we're going to be sharing this out. We're really excited to share this and get your feedback. This is meant for you to take and use. And we would love to hear about how you're using these materials. And I want to make sure that we pause in time for questions, because I know there have been a number of questions in the chat. I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen for a moment so we can see everyone better. And turn it over to Deb to take us through the question and answers. Oh, you're on mute, Deb.
Yeah, right. Yes. Well, first of all, thanks so much to all the speakers who just gave us a tremendous wellspring of information. And the questions, and I do appreciate that people were trying to answer the questions in the chat in many instances as they were asked. I am going to repeat some of those questions because just to make sure that we're clear on the responses. One couple of things just to flag, and Julia just did this too. I see that Myrna is asking, is the toolkit going to be available in Spanish? Yes, we are translating it in Spanish into Spanish. Some of the links within it are already translated. And again, if you save the link to the toolkit, that will be the constantly updated set of documents. And as we get the translations, you'll see them there. You also learned about the kind of stages of doing this kind of outreach. Right at the moment, unfortunately, there isn't that simplified Get CTC site that Courtney told us has been so effective. It's not up there yet. They have to wait until they get certain things worked out with the IRS. It will be later in the year. And so that's something to be aware of. But for now, people do have to be connected to tax preparation help through Vita sites, which can either be, so that means the other wonderful source that Code for America does, the getyourrefund.org site, as you've heard about, lets people do things in the way they want to do them, either going online to file pretty much on their own, going online to file and getting help from a Vita volunteer, or getting connected to where there's an in-person site near them. So those are great options, and getyourrefund.org is the way to get connected to that. So now let's go to a bunch of questions. A question that came up, where do I find access to Vita sites? And someone did put one link to find out more about that. But I'm not sure who to direct this to. Debbie Stein, you could start out, but any of the presenters could join in for suggestions about that.
Sure. So this really is something that Courtney's wonderful organization does. If you go to getyourrefund.org, which is run by Code for America, you can find your local Vita sites and get information about when they're going to be open. And Courtney, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I just put in the chat the direct link to our tax site lookup tool. And just so everybody knows, this is the same data that is on the IRS Vita locator, but it's just in a more mobile friendly way so that it's not, trying to fit everything on one page. One other thing just that I didn't mention was next Monday on January 31st, when Get Your Refund opens up to the public, there will be just a couple of what we call triage questions of just asking some people a little bit more details about their income, all of those things and preferences. And if they say that they really do need in-person services, that's when they'll also be directed to that in-person tax site lookup tool.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Courtney and Debbie. And this is so important to remind everybody who wants to do the outreach. You've been given a lot of suggestions about how to alert people to this wonderful benefit that they can get, but just telling them without giving them the link to getyourrefund.org doesn't help quite enough. But getyourrefund.org really does connect them to finding out the level of assistance that they need. And you should feel great about that, because you don't have to know everything. If you connect people to that site, it will help people get the money they're owed. So thank you for that. there were a lot of questions about who is eligible for the child tax credit. And some of the questions referred to immigrant status. Again, Debbie Stein, I'll start with you, but give other people the opportunity to join in.
Sure. So for the child tax credit, the child must have a social security number. The parent does not need to have a social security number. They do not need to be a documented immigrant, but they do need to have what's called an ITIN. And millions of people who are not authorized to work in this country file taxes every year using an ITIN, and it's a very safe process. A lot of those families already have ITINs, and filing for them should be just like filing with a social security number. Families who have not applied for that ITIN need to do a paper tax return and attach either their original immigration documents, which we do not recommend, or they can get certified copies at organizations that are authorized to do that. And our toolkit, Julia, I believe, has all the information about how to go through that process of getting an ITIN. If immigrant families are considering claiming the credit, which we strongly encourage them to do, they do not need to worry about it affecting their immigration status in this country. And immigrant families that have social security numbers or have ITINs, families that are here on a documented basis or otherwise, do not need to worry about it being counted as a public charge. Under current law, it does not count as a public charge. One other thing I do want to just say about immigrants applying is, of course, immigrants come from lots of countries with lots of different languages. And we just learned yesterday, I think, that the IRS has made available a language line to all the Vita sites. I don't know that quite all of them have chosen to use it, but most of them have. So if immigrants work with a Vita site, they should have access to a language line in most places that will help translate information for them. Was there another piece of the immigration piece that I didn't address?
Well, one question that was raised, or a helpful answer from Lynn Weckworth, thank you, Lynn, that some Vita sites can help clients get ITINs. Some can, some can't. So I don't know if any of our presenters want to expound on that anymore.
I do want to just draw attention to what Julia put in the chat also, which is that the FAQ in the chat has information on eligibility and immigration related questions. So immigrant families, if their children have social security numbers, which in most cases mean the child was born here, they should absolutely be considering applying.
Right. And one thing, while absolutely these various resources will direct someone who's trying to file their taxes to a Vita site, we would certainly recommend that if there is an organization in a given location and they know that they're going to be referring people, for them to get to know the Vita resources in their area, so that they're in a position to know whether you can refer someone to a in-person Vita site that can help with ITINs, or what the other resources that are most helpful there. So that that's part of what we hope you'll be preparing yourself for as you do the outreach. There were another set of questions that have to do with the an eligible child, the family relationships, foster care, and I don't know, I don't mean to impose on you too much, Deb, but I know you know a lot about this, and Julia and Elini or Courtney can jump in too.
So we have a fact sheet that is going to be in the toolkit very soon. It's not there yet. That spells out the foster child eligibility. But the basic eligibility requirements for the child tax credit are that the child has to have a social security number. So I noticed there was a question about undocumented children. They can't get the child tax credit, although the family might be able to get any taxes they owe reduced by a $500 dependent credit. The child must have lived with the family for 6 months and a day or more during the year. And the child must have one of a specified set of relationships with the taxpayer, which I put in the chat, but it has to be the taxpayer's biological, adopted, or stepchild, or biological or step sibling, or descendants of those. I think I'm remembering them all, but you can check in the chat. Or it can be a formally placed foster parent. A child that is staying informally with a family member, and that does happen a lot, right? Grandparents take the child so the kid doesn't have to go in the child welfare system. The grandparent can claim them because they have the biological relationship. A friend of the family can't claim the child tax credit for them, although they could get the dependent credit for them. So there's the child tax credit eligibility depends on the length of time the kid lived in the household, whether the child has that social security number, and it depends on the relationship between the child and the taxpayer. It doesn't depend on formal guardianship. So taxpayers can claim the child even if they were not the formal guardian, and a formal guardian of a child they don't have the relationship with cannot. The other child, when people are adopting a child from overseas, if they don't have the social security number yet, they often have something called an ATIN, and they can't claim the child tax credit for that child either.
Let's see. Thank you very much for that. I'm trying to think if there's any element of that that we didn't cover. Yeah, I mean, it's been going on in the chat, again, clarifying that people, again, the adults can have either social security numbers or ITINs. The children do have to have social security numbers. So there also were some questions clarifying the situation for the people whose incomes are too low to be required to file taxes, but of course we want them to take advantage of the credits, and the timing of when they can file. I don't know, Julia, just to change it up a little bit. Julia, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, although I confess I was answering another question. So could you, which question are we?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Maybe Elini, you want to do that? So the question is, for people whose incomes are too low to be required to file, but we want them to file, what is the time limit for them to file?
There's no time limit. They're not bound by the April 18th date. So they don't even need to file an extension. They can continue filing taxes throughout the year, or with the non-filer portal opening up later in the spring, they could file for the CTC through that instead.
I think Courtney wanted to jump in too.
Yeah, this is actually something we've been debating and thinking about pretty significantly. So anybody, even if they don't have filings or a requirement to file, but they made some income during the year, as we discussed previously, there are other tax credits that may be extremely beneficial for them. And so I think the first kind of question we ask is if there was any income between, you know, $1 and $12,000 for, let's say, a single person. If they can access their tax documents, then we'd push them towards filing a full tax return, either using do-it-yourself tax prep options or seeking help from a Vita site. if they don't have access to those documents, that's when we probably would want to push them to simplified filing to get at least some of their credits. We don't want to get in the way of them at least receiving some of their tax credits in the hope of them getting all of it. What I've noticed in kind of my previous Vita experience, when the first EIP and non-filer tool came out, was that first step of doing a simplified process of filing a tax return motivated people to then go through the work of getting all of their tax documents to file a full tax return. We don't want a ton of people doing amendments. We don't want people to file twice and try to claim, and that's part of the reasoning of simplified filing being delayed this year, but it's really important to meet the client where they're at with what resources they have. And so if they don't have access to their W-2s, if they absolutely have no way of getting them because of different hurdles, then that's when we push them towards simplified filing. And you have 3 years to claim those credits. So even beyond the October 15th filing deadline, you have 3 years. And so that's something we also want to push when telling people about these options.
Yeah, that's terrific advice. And certainly it's terrific advice. And some people have mentioned in the chat, yes, there are other tax credits that people may be able to claim if they've had childcare expenses in the past year. That is now more readily available to people with low incomes. There's the earned income tax credit and some other credits. So the help of everybody on this training session now can help direct people so that they can claim what they're owed. It is a little after 2, so it's time for us to close. But I do just want to remind you that everyone who's registered for this will get the recording, they'll get the slides, they'll get live links, they'll get the toolkit, and the link to the toolkit so that you can keep checking back. You'll get links to us. So if you have more questions, we'd love to work with you so that we can go to the next level of really letting people know what they can claim. One further reminder, if you want the printed copies of the flyer from the comms firm GMMB, sign up, and the link was provided by Deborah Stein in the chat box, but we will be sending this along to you. And you are supposed to do it by Monday, January 31st, and you can indicate how many copies you would like. So that's an extra resource. I'm sure, I know people have more questions. Boy, the questions that were in the chat are pretty much all answered in the toolkit, which is reassuring to us. So thank you very much for all the work that you've been doing. Thank you very much to the speakers, Courtney, Deb Stein, Julia, Elini. Don't be a stranger. We want to keep in touch and help you get this money to the people who need it and have a right to it. So Deb, Courtney, Julia, Elini, any closing things to say?
Not a closing remark per se, but just to add again, and we put our emails in the chat, that we know this training might be a starting point for many of you. Some of you know a lot, and for some of you, you're hearing this info perhaps for the first time, and just want to reiterate the offer that we're happy to sort of work directly with your organization or coalition for additional outreach activities and training. So as Deb said, please don't be a stranger and let us know how we can support.
Great. Absolutely. We'll if you open the refrigerator door and the light comes on, we'll do another webinar. So ask, and thank you all so much. We very much hope we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.